Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the case of Katarzyna Zowada. It is a Polish case and I apologise if I've said her name wrong. I probably have. I've watched a few videos on this. A lot of people say it in very many different ways. I have no idea which is the correct way. I've tried to say it in what I believe is the correct way, but I'm probably still wrong. So my sincerest apologies for that. But her case is seriously disturbing and horrific, and it was suggested to me by one of you guys, so I really want to get awareness out there and get her name out there because it's just so awful what happened to her and so sad. This case was suggested by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and of course if you have any more, please do let me know. Katarzyna was just 23 years old when she vanished. She lived in Krakow and she was studying at university at the time, but she had a few issues. She was a lovely girl. All her friends described her as a very nice young woman, very just like pleasant and lovely, but she was also very withdrawn. She was very distant, and there was a massive reason behind that. She suffered with depression too, and it was because on one occasion she took her father out on this hike and he actually ended up falling. They obviously called the authorities, called ambulances, and he ended up with this spinal injury which ultimately led to his death. And Katarzyna obviously had a lot of guilt and just devastation from losing her father, and she felt really guilty, like it was her fault. Not that it was, because of course it wasn't, but that's how she felt at the time. And it caused a lot of, issues for her and a lot of depression from that. And that was like 2 years before this happened. So obviously she was trying to make her way through life. She was trying to do her studies and she was suffering with her mental health along the way. She started doing psychology when she first started uni, but then she decided halfway through a semester that she was going to change. And she changed to a history course for a short time. But then she changed it again to religious studies. Now, because her daughter was suffering with depression, her mother actually arranged for her to see a psychiatrist, which she was all for. She went to every session. She wanted to help herself, and she figured that the way by doing this was going talking to somebody and get everything out, and it was working for her. So she didn't miss a session, basically. So we're now in November of 1998, and her mother knew that this particular day she was supposed to go to one of her appointments, and I think her mother was going to meet up with her after or meet up with her from there or something like that, but she never turned up, which was very obscure because she turned up to every single one. She wanted the help, she wanted to go, she wasn't being forced into doing it, and so she would have been there if she could, but she wasn't. So she was really worried, especially when her daughter didn't get in touch with her hours after, so she decides to try and file a missing persons report with the police department. But frustratingly enough, they was just very dismissive of it, she'll turn up or she's gone off and done something to herself. That was what they were saying, basically. So if she hasn't gone off and done something to herself, she'll turn up, which is just really frustrating. But they basically told her to wait a little bit before filing the missing persons report. I do believe that eventually the police did take it seriously and begin looking for her, but, a bit too late, really. So the police were looking for her. They were looking at CCTV at all the local spots that she would frequent. They didn't see her in any of them. It was as if she just vanished off the face of the earth, and that was that. That was until a tugboat made a grim discovery. On the 6th of January 1999, a tugboat captain is just on his merry little way, and something gets stuck in one of the sort of propellers of this boat. So, thinking it's just a piece of garbage or whatever, a bit of netting, a bit of something that's just clogging it up, he sends one of his crewmates down to clear it so that they can continue. And his crewmate does this and finds this strange white leathery material stuck in the sort of propeller. When they try to remove it, they are hit with this disgusting, vile smell of decomposition, which must have been an enormous shock for them. The material that they had found was human skin. It wasn't like a body or anything like that. It was skin from a person that had been sliced off with surgical precision and stitched back up to make something like a skin suit, I guess, like a human skin suit. They, of course, contacted the police straight away, and the police came. They was searching the river straight away, looking around, trying to find things. They were kind of thinking maybe along the lines that, you know, a body had got in there, it had been torn apart by the propellers, but this skin wasn't removed by propellers. It was surgically removed, and they were actually able to recover some other parts of the body, I believe like a right arm and some other parts of the body of a female young woman. It was believed that maybe this body had been in the river for a week or so before it got tangled up in the boat and they were found. And later on, it was sort of matched to missing 23-year-old Katarzyna Zowada. And then obviously her mother was told the devastating news that her missing daughter was actually deceased. And I can't even imagine ever knowing any of the details of this case, because somebody literally skinned her daughter and made her, like, stitched it together to make it into a suit, like a full suit that somebody could wear as well. They put specific holes in certain places, and it was intended to be worn as like a costume, which is beyond horrific. Due to the twisted nature of this case, the police did end up asking the FBI for their help. And it wasn't long before they came up with the first suspect. And this is kind of crazy, because not only have we had Katarzyna, who has been like maybe tortured, murdered, skinned, which is beyond horrific, right? So that was in Poland. There's also been another case, which is along similar lines, but the person who did it was not the same. This was the first suspect. He was called Vladimir W, and that's all we know because they they blodge out the end name so that for identity purposes, and also like sometimes on any photos that you can find they black out the eyes too. Just, I don't know why they do it, but they do. So he was the suspect because in May of 1999 he killed his father. But not only did he kill his father, he did it in a similar way where he skinned him, like basically took off his face, made a mask out of it, and then went around all day pretending to his grandpa that he was his son and not actually his grandson, even though he'd killed his son in the basement. His granddad actually believed him for a while. I believe he was quite elderly. He was hard of hearing, hard of sort of vision, whatever the word is for that. Hard of sight, I don't know what it is. But he eventually realised that the person, you know, in front of him was not his son, and came across a grim discovery in the basement, and then obviously the police were called. I believe he was sentenced to 25 years in prison for that murder, and he said that he didn't know Katarzyna. There was no evidence to connect the two, and basically they don't think that he was the one that killed Katarzyna at the time. But a lot of people have, like, what are the chances of, you know, two people being in Poland at around the same time skinning people? It's kind of crazy. You will think that it's the one person, but it wasn't. And sadly, Katarzyna's case did go cold. I believe in 2000 or 2002, not quite sure on that date, that they announced that they had discovered a different DNA with regards to a case, but again, they didn't get any matches on that, and so a case went cold again. Then in 2012, so 13 years after she was killed, obviously, sort of DNA has improved vastly by that point, and they decided to do a 3D scan of her remains. So they did so, and that just sort of revealed some really graphic and horrific details to the case that they didn't really know before. It seemed very likely that she may have been skinned alive, because the scan on her leg was found to show markings that indicated that she'd been chained up, lacerations to her skin that showed she had been slashed numerous times while still alive. It showed that the killer had used heavy objects to shatter her pelvis. So yeah, really, really horrific things that he had beat her up. Just awful, awful. But they sort of learnt more insight into the killer as well, because obviously they knew that she, we didn't know who it was at the time, that was quite intelligent. They were knowledgeable in surgical precision of removing skin. They potentially had sort of some experience in martial arts, and they had used those techniques to inflict pain on Katarzyna. Sadly though, that's about as far as it went. Then in 2017, the police received a letter. Now, this letter stated that they were actually friends with this guy who had visited Katarzyna's grave on numerous occasions, that he was very obsessed with her case, very obsessed with her, and it just was pretty abnormal, so they felt like the police needed to know. This man was 52-year-old Robert Zanchensky. Again, sorry if I've said the name wrong, I probably have. And he had a history that sort of would match with what happened to Katarzyna as well. He'd been described as a man who took pleasure in torturing and skinning animals. He was in the military. He had a job working in the morgue. I'm not sure whether that was actually in the military, it might have been. He had a history of working at a Krakow Institute of Zoology, where he would watch and utilise the process of skinning animals. But he was actually fired from there not long after because he just randomly killed all the rabbits in there, and they didn't know why in the space of one shift, so they got him out of there. He was known for stalking and harassing a number of local women, and he was very highly intelligent. Not only that, he was actually a suspect before, so he was on the police's radar before, but you know, I guess he just dropped off it and they didn't think much of him after that. I don't know why, but they didn't. They arrested him, brought him in for questioning. He claimed that he didn't even know Katarzyna, but obviously he did, because he's visiting her grave and he's obsessed with her case, and even the police witnessed that, so they must have followed him or something at some point and seen him going to her grave, so they knew that he knew of her at the very least. He was lying. So they began to search his home. He wasn't very clean when he did the job on Katarzyna because they actually found traces of blood, and I'm not entirely sure where. This was in his bathroom, so he'd cleaned the sort of the main areas, but I believe, bearing in mind this is like 19 years later, so it's amazing that this was all still there. If you imagine like a framework of a bath or something like that, and the wooden sort of strands going down, I believe it was on something like that, where you wouldn't have even thought to clean, basically. And thank goodness, because they took the blood samples from there, and guess what? They matched Katarzyna's. After this, he did actually confess to killing Katarzyna. It was speculated that he had these horrific fantasies about women. He would often dress up in women's clothes and things like that, and he just wanted to take it one step further and actually dress up in a woman's skin. And sadly, Katarzyna ended up being that woman. The trial did start in 2019. Apparently it was requested that there was a closed trial. I can't find anything else on that. Like, obviously 2020, 2019, 2020, 21, COVID, the world went crazy, everything was delayed, so I assume that he's still waiting in the ranks for all of that. And obviously this is a Polish case as well, so I have looked through the websites and tried to find more information on this, but at the moment there's just nothing. So yeah, if anybody out there from Poland knows what's happening with this case or anything like that, let me know. But at the moment, he's in jail, he's awaiting his trial. And I guess we will find out what happens. My heart breaks what happened to Katarzyna. You know, she was suffering with mental health issues, and she was getting on the right track. She was trying to live with them and work and get herself to a place where she wasn't as depressed all the time. And that is something amazing. Like, you know, some people aren't able to do that. So she was getting there. She was going out, living a life, trying to get over the horrific things that happened in the past. And then this horrible predator comes along, and I don't know, just what he does to her was horrific. And honestly, he is a complete monster in my eyes. Just sick. Really, really sick, with just no respect for women whatsoever. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Katarzyna Zowada. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.